is like a game of Wheel of Fortune. You have some of the letters that are filled in and some of the letters are blank, and you're trying to make sense of all these sounds and put them into words or phrases that make sense in the context of the conversation.
Seeing someone speak and then the whole audience was laughing and I didn't catch the joke.
To just be able to hear someone's mumbling voice or a siren, even though it sounds terrible, or just something.
Hearing loss is invisible. And so walking into a space, no one's gonna look at you and know that you have hearing loss. It's really up to us. My father had hearing loss, and his mother had it as well. So it was definitely a factor in our home growing up. My father was very stigmatized by his hearing loss, and I think if he felt that it made him somehow less than a man, or I think it was different back then. There were a lot of expectations around strength that a lot of men faced. And so I think it was very hard for him to deal with what he saw as weakness in himself. He would do almost anything to hide his hearing loss. It was really an unmentionable topic in my home growing up. So we all sort of had the sense that his hearing loss was something that we just couldn't touch. We couldn't talk about it. It was a big, big secret.
Una de las razones por las que creen que mi pérdida auditiva pudo haber pasado fue porque a los 16 años tuve una operación peridural con una anestesia peridural y quedé paralizada de la cintura para abajo durante 1 año y medio porque la anestesia tocó la raíz de la dura madre atrás. La primera vez comenzó hace aproximadamente unos 15 años, fue muy leve, algo muy el sonido de un teléfono que no lo escuché sonar y por mucho tiempo no afectó mi vida porque solamente había perdido esa frecuencia auditiva que era una frecuencia aguda muy particular que me permitía seguir funcionando a excepción de escuchar ese sonido. Y a partir de ese momento, hace más de 15 años ya, comenzó lo que se llama un progressive hearing loss, una pérdida auditiva progresiva que se fue empeorando a través de los años.
I definitely knew that I needed to get hearing aids, and it was recommended that I get hearing aids, so I decided to do it. And I remember the first time going to the audiologist, and I remember getting the ear molds taken. And so what they do is they put this self-hardening gel into your ears, and as you're sitting there with the gel hardening, all the sound recedes and it just becomes quiet, and you feel all this pressure. And this was the first time I really had put anything into my ears like that. And I remember thinking, you know, is this what it feels like to wear a hearing aid? And I just went home and cried. It was really upsetting experience.
When I got my hearing aid, I would not let anyone see it for very long time. I always wore my hair down and, you know, no one saw it. Just the 1 or 2 people that I had told for maybe 10 years.
When I got the hearing aid, I had volume control, I still do, on my hearing aid, and I would be touching it to boost the sound up or to lower it because hearing so much sound, even though it was so much clarity. It was wonderful. It was a lot, and I wasn't used to it. So I'm sure that people noticed that I was doing. I mean, you put your hand behind your ear. What are you doing? But I never told anyone.
I was waiting on tables in a restaurant, and in the middle of taking an order, my hearing aid battery died, so I could hear nothing. So I quickly took it out of my ear, made an excuse that I had to go into the kitchen, and I took it and I just put it in the waiter's station and put it behind some glasses. Went back, took the order as best I could, then I went to get the hearing aid, changed the battery, and put it back in. And a waiter was standing there holding my hearing aid, and he said, "What is this?" And I just froze, and I watched him take my $900 hearing aid and throw it in the garbage, because that was better, a better scenario than me saying, "It's mine, I can't hear." Fortunately, after everyone left, I took it out of the garbage and I put it back in.
I've been wearing hearing aids off and on for more than half my life at this point. And the confusing thing about hearing aids is that while they're fabulous miracle devices and they help me incredibly, and I'm very, very grateful for them, they don't fix your hearing loss entirely. And I think that's really misunderstood by a lot of people.
When you get your first hearing aid, you are hearing so much more than you knew. I remember the first time I went home with it, and I'm in the kitchen, and I'm hearing a sound, and I have no idea what the sound was. The refrigerator. Never knew the refrigerator made sound.
I think people think that hearing aids are like glasses, where you put glasses on and there's an image that's blurry, and all of a sudden it sharpens and you can see clearly. And hearing aids are not like that. Hearing aids just make things louder, so they amplify the sound, but they don't make it clearer or crisper or sharper. And the other thing that hearing aids are not good at doing is distinguishing among sounds. So they make everything louder, which means that if you're in a restaurant, the clinking of the glasses and the cutlery is amplified in addition to the voice of the person across from you. And sometimes in a situation like that, it's actually harder to hear because the background noise is so loud relative to the sounds that you want to hear. So when we go to the restaurant, my family and I, we have our ritual. We walk in and we sort of assess the situation. We figure out which seat is the best for me to sit in so that I have the right lighting that I need, that I have, hopefully a wall or a corner behind me so that I can block out some of that background noise that might be distracting me. And then what I try and do is put the person who is most difficult for me across from me and to the side, so that no matter if they're looking forward or at any of the other people sitting at the table, their voice will be projected towards me.
Una gran amiga me dijo, cada vez que en la pérdida auditiva tú tienes un drop, que es ese momento en que te levantas o que bajaste abajo, caminaste y lo sentiste, porque lo sientes como una cosa, como que de repente el sonido, el oído hace ¡fua! Baja y dejas de escuchar ese porcentaje. Es un duelo que tú tienes que pasar, es un proceso de psicológico difícil, es un proceso que no sabes cuán fuerte van siendo las pérdidas hasta que las vas viviendo y las tienes que ir enfrentando, porque entonces te acostumbraste, pusiste tu casa de una manera hasta que te das cuenta, wow, ya no escucho ni cuando tocan la puerta.
About 14 years ago, I was at a music venue and my son was performing, and I was usually very careful to take my hearing aid out and wear an earplug, and I just wanted to hear the music just that one night. So I took it out. And I went home that night, and over the course of the next week, I lost my hearing completely. And they hospitalized me to give me steroid treatments to try to bring it back, but they could not. So at that point, I had absolutely no sound whatsoever coming into my head, and I had no word discrimination whatsoever, and I was essentially deaf. I could hear nothing. And friends came to visit me, and they were so great. They bought me books about politics and just all kinds of art books to draw because I love to draw. And something happened, and I said, you know, I'm still the same person. I can't hear a damn thing, and I'm not sure how I'm going to live without my hearing, but my friends are here. My son and his prom kids, because they were graduating, they all came to the hospital. And I said, I think maybe I can do this. I was visiting Cuba with my good friend Holly, and we were walking down this tiny little street. All of a sudden, I just heard a drum, and I said, that's a djembe. So we went to where we heard the sound, and sure enough, someone was playing the drum. And I realized I'd heard them in people playing djembe in the subway, but I just realized how much I could hear that sound, because there's music all over Cuba, but I couldn't really hear any of it. But a djembe has a very, very deep sound, especially when you play it. You hold it in your legs, so it's a very strong vibration. So I went home and I said, I gotta learn how to play one of these. My son is a drummer, so he got me a djembe, and I started to take lessons. And it's everything that you miss when you have hearing loss. It's like, you know, music is food for the soul. You know, it brings back memories. It puts us in a particular place in time, and you really lose that. But when I sit down, I can be so agitated. When I sit down and I start to play and I hear that deep sound, and I'm not very good at it, but it's the most wonderful. It just fills my soul, you know. So again, I feel so lucky to just find these little ways, and that's something that we have to share with each other, because that has just opened up this whole other place for me for music.
There was one time when my daughter was very young, and she got stung by a bee. And so, of course, my husband and I did the natural thing, which was to completely panic. We were new parents, and we didn't know what to do. And so we were in a heated situation. All our communication best practices sort of flew away, and he was saying something to me, and I wasn't able to hear him, and we were just sort of yelling back and forth at each other in a panic of trying to talk about what we were going to do to help her with this bee sting. And of course it really was fine. We just needed to give her a little Benadryl and everything was fine. But it showed just how quickly communication can break down in a challenging situation.
Probably the most difficult communication experience that I've ever had was when my brother was battling cancer for 2 years, and he was being treated in New York City, but he lived out of state and he lived alone. And since I had the most flexible work schedule at that time, I was voted the person to be his point person, his liaison with the hospital and his care. But I was very happy to do that. And right off the bat, I knew we were going to have a problem because he had emergency surgery, and then we had to meet right afterwards with his new oncologist. So it was myself, my husband, my brother, and the oncologist. So I said, do you have CART, which is where someone types for you and you read captioning in real time? And of course, they've never heard of that because there's very little awareness about people with hearing loss. I said, you have someone that could type? They didn't. So there I sat in the room, and I was speech reading, and then my husband said he would jot notes for me when I didn't get something. That's what we usually did. So they were talking about my brother's history, and I was following okay. And then my brother said to the oncologist, how much time do I have? So I'm focusing to speech read this. And when the doctor answered, he turned his head, and I missed what he said. And I looked at my husband, and he just looked at the doctor, and I knew it was terrible because nobody was saying anything, but I didn't know what had happened. And I couldn't ask him to repeat it because I knew it was terrible news. I didn't want my brother to hear it again. So 2 hours later, when we got back to my apartment and my brother took a nap, I said to my husband, well, and he said he has 1 year, 2 if he's lucky, for 2 hours. I didn't know what my brother had been told. And then we moved on for 2 years. I went to more surgeries, procedures, tests with my brother, and I could never get accommodation. So I was bringing friends in to type. Sometimes they gave me a typist from the hospital. They were awful. You know, just imagine sitting there with 3 or 4 doctors and everyone's firing questions. And the person that would have to interpret for me, because I could speech read him most of the time, was my brother. So he had to keep repeating this negative, awful information over and over again. I mean, he was dealing with enough with his own illness. But then he also had to deal with my disability. He didn't really want to talk about the bad stuff anymore. I don't think he wanted me to know how bad it was. So he just sort of avoided interpreting for me and kind of left me in the dark. And I understood that. And then when he was very ill and he was home with hospice, he was becoming paralyzed. So the hospice people, he lost the ability to write. So the hospice people were our ears, and they would just write notes back and forth because we couldn't even really, we could speech read a little bit, and he was losing his hearing from the chemotherapy. So, I mean, it was just, you know, the worst case scenario. But again, you know, my brother died in peace, and we did the best we could. But again, it helped me to find something that I love to do in my life and gave me purpose in my life from my brother in that experience.
More than 80% of people with hearing loss have sensorineural hearing loss, which is caused by damage to the cochlea, or inner ear.
For me, it's sometimes hard to hear people with specific voice tones. So my hearing loss is a unique one. I'm sort of drawing my audiogram here as we're talking. And I have a very good high-pitch hearing, which is unusual. Most people who have hearing loss, it actually starts in their high pitches. And this is helpful for me because it has a lot of speech tones, so that's good news. But these mid-range voices are the hardest for me to hear. So there's certain friends and certain members of my family that are always harder for me to hear because of the quality of their voice, or perhaps they just speak softly. Some people have different ways of speaking.
Cuando yo hice la primer drop auditivo, lo que es la ironía de la vida, la persona que más me costaba escuchar era mi hermana, porque ella tenía justo el tono de la voz en la primera frecuencia que yo perdí. Digamos que solo tengo vínculos con mi hermana, muy cercana. Hemos estado realmente inseparables, es la palabra que nos caracteriza, unidas ante muchas adversidades que hemos vivido juntos. Es realmente una figura muy de fraternidad y compenetración que ambos tenemos.
Actually, right now, I'm in the process of considering a cochlear implant. I was told years ago when I first lost my hearing that I wasn't a candidate because I have an acoustic neuroma, which is a tumor. I'm very calm and very ready to do this, I think. The big issue is which ear. The possibility of having more gain and more benefit would probably be my left ear without the tumor because it's a healthier nerve. This year, I probably would not have as much gain, but I have about 2 functioning hair cells left in this ear. And it means so much to me that I'm scared to death of losing that teeny bit of sound. So at this point, but that could change, I feel like I'm going to go with this side. And if I can just hear some sound in this ear, if I could ever hear 3 words out of this ear, I would be elated.
Unlike a hearing aid that simply amplifies sound, Cochlear implants send sound directly to the hearing nerve and onto the brain.
Para calificar un implante coclear tienes que tener lo que se llama una sordera extrema. Y durante los 8 años que la perdí empeorando, ya yo era candidato a un implante coclear. Lo que pasa es que durante el proceso te dicen que ese poco que te queda, ese 30% que te queda ahí para del cual tú estás escuchando, lo más probable es que lo pierdas durante la operación. Entonces, you don't want to, como se dice en inglés, you don't want to let go ese poquito que te queda, aunque ese poco no te sirva para nada. Es una operación donde mentalmente tienes que estar muy tranquila porque la operación es lo más fácil del proceso, es todo lo que viene después de la operación. En el momento que te conectan puede ser que el nervio no sea apto al implante, o sea que después que te operan pasas un mes para tú saber si el implante fue efectivo o no, porque no es que escuchas ese día, pasan como 6 meses para que escuches de nuevo. Es ese momento en que prenden ese electrodo y tú dices, el nervio reaccionó y voy a aprender a escuchar otra vez. Lo primero que escuché y fue la voz de mi hermana el día de la activación, y ella tiene la voz más aguda que te puedes imaginar, lo que es una voz high frequency. Entonces cuando ella habló el día de la activación, era una de las voces que yo había perdido hacía ya muchos años, y cuando el cerebro empezó a escucharla a ella, empezó como una máquina. Yo me imagino a veces cuando la computadora piensa que está dando vueltas, y capté esa poquita frecuencia que ella dijo, funcionó. Esa es la pregunta que tú le haces al médico, ¿funcionó? Y yo escuché el final, o no, pero fue una emoción de decir, wow, tengo 15 años que no escucho esta frecuencia, y eso nunca lo voy a olvidar porque era la voz más importante para mí escuchar en la vida, la que yo había perdido. Una de las cosas más difíciles de entender con el implante es que seguimos siendo sordos, inclusive más sordos que cuando nos hicimos el implante. Entonces básicamente cuando tienes el procesador externo, que es lo que usas cuando te lo quitas para dormir, pero solo escuchas en el minuto en que yo lo pego al magneto que está dentro de mi cabeza. Si yo quito ambos aparatos, estoy completamente sorda. En el momento que los pego nuevamente a lo que es el electrodo interno, es que puedo escuchar. No es que volvemos a escuchar, simplemente que es un mecanismo digital que le permite al nervio auditivo escuchar sin que el sonido pase a través del oído. Yo lo pongo como ejemplo de que nuestro cerebro es como un disco duro. En ese disco duro están todas las voces de las personas que yo escuchaba durante mi vida en que podía escuchar bien. En el momento en que eres implantada y te activan, es como que tu cerebro, al escuchar a esa persona que había escuchado en el pasado, ¿verdad?, inmediatamente hacía la conexión y decía, esta es la voz de María, esta es la voz de Pedro, y me la ponía muy parecido a como yo la escuchaba antes. Nunca es como antes, pero es muy parecido. El segundo implante, que lo hice hace 1 año y medio, mejoró muchísimo la situación de entender voces desconocidas.
When I lost my brother, and I was coming out of a really difficult 2 years, I just said, I have to do something positive with this. I can't just leave it like this. It was too sad. I didn't know what to do with that 2-year experience. I just had so much sadness. And it wasn't just mourning that loss. It was what had gone on for 2 years and all of those frustrations and people not understanding. And I just said, this can't happen anymore. I had done some advocacy work with captioning and other things, and I just said, you know, this is where people come to get well. This is where people come to get healthy, and it's not just about physical health, it's about emotional health, but above all else, it's about being able to communicate. And it's dangerous not to be able to do that. I think sometimes that I hear what people are saying. If I don't, I have no problem saying, I didn't hear you, can you repeat that? But sometimes I think I've heard it and I find out later I didn't, and that's very scary every day. But in a hospital, if the doctor says to me, are you allergic to any medications? And I mishear that question and give the wrong answer, I have a big problem. The doctor has a problem and the hospital has a problem. And I just said, you know, and it's not just about people with hearing loss, it's about communication in a hospital. And everybody with perfect hearing in a stressful situation doesn't hear and process as well. And I just said, this is a big mountain here, but I'm going to figure out how to do this. So I've been working on it for a few years, meeting with hospitals, doing some writing, and we're making some progress. But on the anniversary of my brother's passing, he died in 2013 this year, I just said my brother was a forest ranger for part of his life, and I said, I need a new path here. And I said to my brother, show me the way. And I am finding a new path. And what I've learned about that path is it's about collaboration. It's about having those few good people in your life that really want to make a change and really have their heart there, like I had when I was a social worker, and the people that I worked with there, that you find those people and you can do anything, just as you're doing here with this video.
So as part of my advocacy, I also decided to start a blog, livingwithhearingloss.com. And it started off almost as therapy for myself a little bit more. I didn't know who would be reading it or what was going to happen with it. And I remember the first post that I wrote was ahead of Thanksgiving, because I was thinking about the trip out to see my in-laws, and our Thanksgivings were always this big, fun family event. And with my hearing loss, I was just worried, you know, would I be able to enjoy the festivities with so many people? And I felt that writing about it might be a way to sort of help me process it, help me think of suggestions or things that I could do to make the experience better. And then I decided to share it with the world. I remember sitting there having typed it all into the blog, and then you kind of hit publish and you say, uh-oh, what have I done? But I was amazed actually at the response and the comments that I got from other people who were feeling the exact same way as they headed into the holiday. And so for me, it was just so reinforcing that we need each other. We need the support of other people with hearing loss. And so I try and use my blog as a way to share my experiences and connect with other people with hearing loss, because I feel like when we support one another, we're much stronger that way. So what I try and do is share experiences that I have in my life, and then think of tips and tricks that I use in my life to live well with hearing loss, and then try to share them with other people.
Mi sobrina que tiene 17 años, mi pérdida auditiva comenzó desde que ella nació. Entonces ella se aprendió de una manera natural a hablarme a mí de una forma que era la única persona que yo le escuchaba todo el tiempo. Hace poco estaba realizando su essay, un trabajo que hizo para la universidad, para entrar a la universidad, y una de las frases que puso que me llegó a mi corazón fue: tengo mejor comunicación con mi tía sorda que con todo el mundo con quien estoy rodeado que escucha perfecto. Y eso realmente, esa frase cuando la leí me conmovió mucho porque nunca en la vida, yo creo que en 17 años hemos discutido 2 veces, y realmente que la manera en que ella entiende el proceso de la pérdida auditiva no es normal en una adolescente. Yo la llevo a las reuniones de la asociación, y la manera en que las otras personas que tienen pérdida auditiva dicen: wow, le entiendo todo a tu sobrina. O sea, no es solamente a mí, sino es una persona que tiene una conciencia total y absoluta de cómo hablarle a alguien para que entienda cuando no tiene audición. Pero es algo que a ella le ha salido de una manera natural. Obviamente somos una familia muy pequeña, muy unida, somos 3 mujeres que estamos las 3 juntas todo el tiempo. Le salió de una manera que no creo que sea fácil en una familia grande donde hay muchos hermanos. Ella es hija única. Durante el implante ella fue la persona que me enseñó los sonidos. Cuando te ponen el implante, tú vas a identificar sonidos que no sabes qué son. Entonces ella me decía: eso es un avión, eso es un camión, y ella me ayudaba a identificar los sonidos para yo aprender otra vez esa nueva forma de escuchar.
ASL stands for American Sign Language. You've probably seen people, here, there, and everywhere, using their hands to talk, and it is a beautiful language to watch. But if you don't know the language, it's not an accommodation. So often, for those of us with hearing loss, if we're going to a meeting or a show or a presentation and we ask for, or in healthcare, and we go and we ask for accommodation, the very first thing that someone will offer is an ASL interpreter. And what I always say is that would be like getting me a Greek interpreter. Like, I wouldn't understand it anymore. But I don't know sign, and none of my friends with hearing loss know sign.
Nunca lo aprendí durante los años que empecé a perder la visión porque no tenía con quién practicarlo. Generalmente el lenguaje de señas se aprende cuando vives en una comunidad de personas sordas y vas a la escuela, vas a tu grupo de amistades, tu familia, naciste en una familia cuyos padres son sordos y hacen lenguaje de señas y te comunicas entre ellos. Pero en mi caso, en mi trabajo, cuando fuera a la vida real, nadie habla con lenguaje de señas, entonces no iba a tener con quién comunicar.
I still live in a hearing world. People are really aware of people who are deaf and sign, okay? But they really don't have a sense of people with hearing loss, because hearing loss isn't visible, because we're not signing, and because people don't like to say that they can't hear. I don't get angry about that, because I know that people just don't know. I did not know anything about hearing loss until I became deaf, and I found this organization, Hearing Loss Association of America, who started to educate me and whatever, and I knew nothing about it until I found that. So when other people don't know either, I have patience with that.
The pandemic has made things very tough for people with hearing loss. I mean, we already tend to isolate ourselves because socializing is challenging, but now that everyone was isolated, it really felt like we were even more isolated.
I think when you lose your hearing, or when you have any kind of loss in your life, sometimes you become very focused on yourself, especially with hearing loss, because it's something that makes you go inward, because it's difficult to continue to be more outgoing and more social. So you really focus a lot on yourself.
When we're talking, when you have hearing loss, we rely a lot on facial expression and on watching someone, how they use their mouth. If someone is covering their mouth, you're not hearing nearly as well. And this is why the masks now with the pandemic have made it that much more challenging for us with hearing loss, because we're not seeing the mouth, we're not seeing the smile, we're not seeing any facial expressions. Makes it much harder.
Y básicamente somos nosotros los primeros que nos ponemos ese estigma de pensar que nuestra vida, nuestro negocio va a cambiar porque la gente lo sepa, cuando es todo lo contrario. Digamos que cuando yo salí del closet de la audición, por llamarlo así, fue un proceso donde fue totalmente opuesto a todo lo que yo me imaginé.
I never really knew anyone else with hearing loss. However, there were many times with clients over the years that I could tell were having trouble hearing me speak, and I would take out my hearing aid and I would say, "This will change your life." And many times they would go for the hearing test and they would get hearing aids, and that really did make a difference. My late husband used to say, "The story isn't written until it's written," which means that we should never jump ahead and we should never imagine, because we don't know what the future will bring. So to have hope that it will all work out. And I think as this relates to hearing loss, especially for someone that's newly diagnosed, I think that you will find that by getting, whether it's hearing aids or cochlear implants or using assistive devices, that whatever it is that's recommended to help you hear well and live well. I think with hearing loss that there are silver linings, and one of the things that my hearing loss friends have heard me say more than once is, I know the gift of hearing loss.
Well, what really changed for me was when I had children. Because my hearing loss is genetic, I always worried that I was going to pass it on to them. And I saw them watching me do the same things my father had done. I would laugh at jokes I hadn't heard, and I would isolate myself in certain situations. And I just knew that I was passing on the same stigma and embarrassment and shame. And I just didn't want to do that. I wanted to break the cycle. So I just made a decision that I was going to do it a different way. Around that time, I also started volunteering at different hearing loss nonprofit organizations. And I felt like that was really a life-changing moment, because it was the first time that I ever had contact with other people with hearing loss, other than, of course, my father.
When I think of the people that I've met through HLAA who live these lives of resilience and accomplishment and bravery, and we laugh a lot too, and also with kindness, it's a really big gift. So that has absolutely been a silver lining of the hearing loss.
Era increíble el saber que durante todos estos años, 15 años o más, yo nunca había compartido con alguien que tuviera pérdida auditiva. De repente llegamos ahí como una convención de 2.000 personas donde todas tenemos el mismo problema. Y fue para mí y para mi familia un cambio de vida trascendental.
That was really the first time that I had met other people with hearing loss, except for my father. And it was really a life-changing experience because I finally found other people that understood what I was experiencing. It was just such a wonderful experience, and I stopped feeling so alone in my struggles with hearing loss because I saw there were so many other people out there who had the same experience. And I was so inspired by them because so many of them were doing wonderful things. They were musicians, or they were entrepreneurs, or they were doing all types of things in their life very successfully. And so it gave me hope.
I never would have imagined that I would have been involved in a program that would open up the conversation.
I've accepted that I can't hear. There's no cure for my hearing right now. There's nothing I can do about it. So I accept it. But what's hard for me to accept are the things that are fixable, and they don't get fixed. You're a group of a few people that really have a heart and really want to make a difference, and you're doing it. You're going to bring awareness. I don't know what else you're going to do, but it's a wonderful opportunity, not just for all of you, but it's an opportunity for us to be able to share what we have and to work together. So it's just a few good people, and you can do a lot.
La primera razón por la que decidí hacer un documental, hay mucha información en lo audiovisual acerca del cáncer, acerca de otras situaciones que toca vivir en la vida, pero de la pérdida auditiva no hay, y es necesario tenerla.